Yeah. Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, you guys didn't see that. You guys caught me when I was dancing. I was jamming a little bit. Well, welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. I have a Philippines versus Philippines matchup. Of course, you guys know Rogelio Antonio Jr. And Eugene Torre, legends of the chess scene, not just in the Philippines but around the world. You have to know these guys. These are the OGs of chess. But I do have a matchup between the two of them. This was played in 1998, so it was a Rogelio Antonio Jr. versus Eugene Torre match. And I think how many they played like 14 games or something, 13, something like that. They played like just a match between each other in 98. So I went ahead and grabbed one of those games from that tournament. And as always, my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay, kamusta na, masaya akong mukinikang muli, maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video, mabuting pagbati. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, taking a look at my stuff. So if you guys are ready to go, let's get in and see what we have for this game. So we got e4, e5, knight comes to f3, we see knight to c6, bishop to b5, a6, bishop comes down to a4. Now, this is probably going to be one of the most common, move orders that you see as far as the Ruy López, like the king's pawn, e4, e5 situations come up. Because you're just defending the pawn, you're attacking the pawn, and you're trying to remove the defender of their own pawn. So they're all very principled, logical moves, been played for hundreds of years, and this is actually called the Morphy defense of the Ruy López. Paul Morphy was not the first person to actually play this. In the actual database, it shows games as long ago as 1845, which is 13 years, before Paul Morphy was playing it. But it has been attributed to his name. So we do see knight to f6, and we see castles. And as you guys know, even though it looks slightly different, you're not risking losing the pawn because you're going to be moving the rook here, and the bishop is going to be taken. You're going to be able to get your pawn back, so you're going to be a-okay. So we do see bishop to c5. We see c3, and we got b5, bishop to b3. We have d6. We got d4, bishop backs up to b6, and then we do have h3. And in this position, it actually might look like, okay, you might be thinking, okay, well, I went d6. I got this pawn protected. I don't have to worry about the pins on this file, so can I just take the pawn now? Well, unfortunately, in this particular situation, if you do take knight takes e4 here, it's going to be a big oops because you're going to be looking at bishop to d5, and you can see that you're forked now for the cost of a pawn. So you definitely don't want to do that. So that's why in the game we actually see bishop to b7, and now you actually can take the pawn. But we do see rook to e1. We got castles. We see a4. Knight comes to a5. We want to preserve the bishop, so we go bishop to c2. And then we see c5, which is the novelty of the game. I think it's pretty logical. I mean, most of you guys out there are probably looking like, oh yeah, I mean, c5 has to come. It's not that it's just c5 is so special, but it's just the fact that you have this really nice pawn center, and you have two pawn breaks possible, maybe f5, or you do have c5. And c5 is the one that could come, the quickest. So we do see d5 just closing the center up, and actually making this bishop, kind of bad. So that's definitely a good move to make. We see c4. We're thinking of possibly having, maybe this square or this square for a knight potentially in the future. And black is just trying to make their own claim of getting as much space as possible. So as you guys can see, in the opening going into the middle game, that's pretty much what the players are fighting for, like, the space. So knight comes to a3. We see queen down to d7. Because, of course, we were threatening to capture, and then take back with the knight. We were just going to be a pawn to the good. Bishop comes to e3. We see bishop takes e3, rook takes e3. We have rook f to b8. We see knight down to d2. And knight to d2 is very useful because, it just adds protection to the base of your pawn chain. So you definitely don't want that to be, a victim at any point. So we do see bishop to c8. We got b4, which allows pawn takes b3 en passant. We see knight takes b3, knight takes b3, bishop takes b3. And then we see queen to c7. We see knight down to c2. We see a5. And something kind of has to give, because I mean, you're going to be, if you allow this pawn push, you're going to be kind of ripping the position open. And you kind of have, you know, I mean, this bishop is definitely loose. So it's kind of, you know, getting blocked by these pawns and stuff like that. So it doesn't have like a lot of real estate to be maneuvering around. So we do see pawn takes b5, rook takes b5, and then we throw a little tempo on the rook. And so the rook has like a couple different things it can do. What we actually saw in the game was rook to c5. And then we saw knight to a3, taking advantage of this, you know, kind of little hole in the position. And of course, you know, you don't want to go this way because you're going to be looking at this fork here. And that's not a very nice fork. It's pretty sad. So you actually did have the ability to go rook to b6. And then after bishop comes to c6, you can actually contest the bishop with bishop to b7. And then the bishop would take, the rook would take, you got knight down to e1, knight back to d7, queen to a4, rook a to b8. You have h4, knight to c5, but you do have the ability to grab your pawn on a5, and then the queen to e7, you know, putting a little threat on this pawn over here. But this is actually very strong for black, because you do have this fork coming up. So it's not the nicest to be looking at. But like I said, we did see rook to c5, knight to a3. We see bishop down to a6. We saw bishop up to c6. We see rook over to b8, rook to b1, rook down to b6. And I mean, you pretty much can clearly see what the intention is. Like, you're going to be giving up the exchange for this bishop. This bishop is just like too powerfully placed. It's just like too great in this position. It's kind of like a knight, you know, when you get a knight like deep into your enemy territory, you know, you're definitely considering like taking it off with a rook. We see queen over to c2. We see g6, rook e to e1, rook b takes c6, pawn takes c6, queen takes c6, and then we do have queen to b2. We're planning on meeting rook takes here with our own, you know, check over here. So we're not worried about it. So the king just steps out of the way. We have king to g7. Queen comes up to b8 anyway. We see knight over to d7, queen to d8, bishop down to d3. We see rook b to d1. We see rook takes c3, knight down to b1. We got bishop takes b1, rook takes b1, and then we have a4. And we are up a pawn as black, and it just kind of looks like there's not a lot that's stopping this pawn. So it's actually a pretty desirable looking position for black visually, but you know, it's kind of like, it's kind of pretty even. I mean, as far as both sides are concerned, that's what, at least what the computer's saying. Like, yeah, pretty much even. So we see rook b to d1. We see a3. We see queen down to e7. We see a2. And as you guys can see, you know, this rook and this queen are possibly coming behind this pawn. And you're probably going to have to go ahead and back the rook up to a1. But we see king to h2 from white, just sidestepping any issues. And we have reached a point in the game that if you do want to pause the video and see what Eugene Torre plays in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, so this move is pretty interesting. I was sitting there for a minute and I was trying to see like what the tactical idea was behind it, but I couldn't find one, and also the computer just says it's just completely dead lost. It's actually queen to c5. And I'm not sure if he miscalculated this or if he still thought that he was holding on to this knight, or maybe he was in time trouble. I'm not sure what the situation was, but this just like completely 100% just drops the knight. There are no tactics involved. I mean, you know, of course, after the queen takes what we saw in the game, it is this position that Eugene Torre does resign the game. You know, you're able to get a pawn here, but that's pretty much it. You know, like I said, there's not, I mean, there's, you know, a check here at some point maybe, but I mean, the king can just step back down. You know, you're not really threatening much here. So like I said, I mean, it's just literally just a loss of a piece. And then, you know, this pawn is possibly dropping as well. So it is not a nice position to be in, to drop a piece. Everybody's done it. It's never nice. It's never like, oh, cool, I dropped the piece. Like, you're happy. No. I've dropped many pieces in my day. But yes, that was that game taken from, let's see, was it 23 years ago? It's quite a long time ago. But to get to these languages, for all my people in the Philippines, let me hit you guys with these good mornings, And it's perfect because it's 4 o'clock in the morning, so everybody will see. So maanyong buntag, mayad na agahan, naibag na bigat, masantos ya kabason, marhe na aga, buenos dias, maanyong aga, mapia na uma, kapian kapunog dios, mayap a abak, mayad na aga, mapia agay, mapia kapapita, my big abukla, maraja na buntag, maraya may nat, and this one, okay, Maupe na aga. Yes. Kasanyangan si ilobi. Salam. Assalamu alaikum. And, merci. Shukran. Whatever else there might be. And I appreciate you guys very much. And I will see y'all next time.